This is our third part of the different types of competition, and we're looking at monopolistic competition today. Now, if I could ask you to read the case study to get a sense of what is made up of for monopolistic competition. So please pause the recording and read from your printout or handout, and then join us again in a few minutes. So assuming you've read the case study, what are some characteristics of monopolistic competition? So if we were to look at things like number of firms, the type of product, role of advertising, price taker or price maker, and barriers to entry and exit. And again, you may wish to pause the slide and write those characteristics down. They're not by any means all of the characteristics, but some of the major ones. So number of firms, numerous. Type of product, basically it's the same. So a haircut is a haircut, but the firms produce on product differentiation. So if we look at, we have some very low-cost haircuts that happen. There's some very high-end haircuts that happen, but basically it is still a haircut. Role of advertising can play a major role, sometimes in order to build brand loyalty. Price taker or price maker, it's price taker. And again, there we have this downward sloping demand curve. And barriers to entry and exit are usually moderate. So why it's called monopolistic competition? Well, let's look at this for a moment. So it shares some perfect competition characteristics. So there's the competition side of things. But through advertising and product differentiation, it is really striving to achieve some of the market powers monopolies enjoy. So it's kind of it's a combination of having some characteristics of a monopoly and some of perfect competition, and hence the term monopolistic competition. The IB, you need to be careful when you are using terms such as if you are dealing with a pure monopoly, you might not want to use the term monopolistic or monopolistic competition because then you're referring to this type of competition. So just watch your vocabulary carefully that you're distinguishing between monopolies and monopolistic competition. So structure. Number of firms, relatively large number of small producers. So price fixing is impossible. So each firm has a small share of the market and each firm acts independently of others. The number of firms, though, might not be as large as when we're dealing with perfect competition. Relative size of firms, the pricing and output behavior of one firm has minimal impact on others. And barriers to entry, we do have some product differentiation, financial, patents, copyright, licenses, and there's some impact of output on price, again, with the firm having a downward sloping demand curve. And as discussed, the products can be similar but not identical. They can be close substitutes. There may be physical differences if you think of clothes, shoes, books, processed foods, or quality differences or location differences. Some are in more high traffic areas and so on. Might be differences in services, product image, and they might use celebrity advertising. Advertising may be informative or persuasive. So you might ask, well, what is the difference? Advertising, when it's informative, it's like an educational piece. It's telling you maybe of a product that you don't know of that you'd be very interested in purchasing, or the characteristics of the product. Or it could be persuasive, where it's trying to persuade you to buy something. Just as a sideline, when I was studying business, they said the difference in advertising of when you find it irritating and when you don't. If it's a product that you go, I wish I had known about this, or this is like fantastic, it's going to something that's going to enhance my life in some other way, then the advertising is not irritating. It's when the advertising is hitting a market and you're not part of the target market where it can be annoying. Market power, limited control over price by extent of profit differentiation or product unprecedented profit differentiation, probably product differentiation, my apologies, little ability for collusion. So the downward pricing and output policy, so the downward sloping demand curve, because output has an impact on the price. And because the products are at the same time a substitute for the other, this demand curve tends to be relatively elastic. So it tends to be more elastic than in a monopoly, but less elastic than in perfect competition. And one of the things that you'll be relieved to see is that the diagram basically for monopolistic competition, at least when they're earning abnormal profits in the short run, it's going to look identical to a monopoly, but the monopolistic competition demand curve would be more elastic. So if you were ever to compare and contrast the two diagrams and have them side by side, you would need to draw a flatter demand curve for monopolistic competition. We can have profit maximization in the short run. We can have supernormal profit is possible in the short run, but we'll see that it's not possible in the long run because the barriers to entry are not all that substantial. They could have competition coming in and taking away from their customer base. If this were to happen, the demand curve shifts left and becomes more elastic in the long run. The market share is reduced and more competitive, and any abnormal or supernormal profits end up disappearing, and we'll see this with a diagram. And we can have profit maximization in the long run, but normal profit only because we have those insufficient barriers to entry. Okay, so I'm going to let you read this on your own. So if you can pause this and then come back to the presentation. But product differentiation is by itself not enough for the creation of monopoly power. It's also important for customers to be convinced that the product is worth purchasing. Monopolistically competitive firms pursue this objective through advertising and branding. The objective of advertising and branding is to influence consumer tastes in favor of the product. And I'll let you read this on your own. Pause and come back. All right, so let's actually draw this in the short run. It's going to look exactly like a monopoly graph, except remember, if you were drawing the two side by side, you would show this demand curve for monopolistic competition, the demand curve being the AR curve, as being flatter, more elastic, because there are these close substitutes. So we're going to start with drawing average cost curve, which is like the parabola, average cost. We're going to have marginal cost swoop through the minimum. Marginal cost, we'll have average revenue. Sorry, that got very messy. And marginal revenue swooping through the x-axis. We're going to produce where MC equals MR. So maybe I'll change the colors. That will be the Q. Once you know where MC equals MR, that's the profit maximizing quantity. We forget about MC and MR and focus on average revenue and average cost to find out if we're looking at profit, loss, or break even we have. So here it is intersecting with average revenue, which gives you the price. Here it is intersecting with average cost. We see that revenue is greater than cost. And so here we have the supernormal profit in the short run. And there it is drawn for you more professionally than my hand drawing on the tablet. All right, now let's look at it in the long run. I have the instructions printed on the next slide. So what will happen in the long run if you have supernormal profits is that firms will enter the market. The demand for the product for the firm will fall, and the average revenue curve will shift left. Now, you don't need to show this on any diagram, not that I'm aware of. I'm just going to show you the end result of when the supernormal profit has disappeared, and that's because their customers have been competed away, their demand curve shifts left, and the supernormal profit disappears. So here's going to be the final result. The long run equilibrium will show normal profits only. So what you're going to start off with is you're going to draw AC to begin with, MC sweeping through the minimum, marginal revenue, and then you're going to. So here's average cost. Here's marginal cost coming through the minimum. Then I'm going to draw marginal revenue. Okay, so then find where MC equals MR and Q. So MC equals MR is here. We're going to bring this down and call that Q. Okay, so then go up, excuse me, up to average cost. So there it is. And draw a tangent. So I don't know about you, but when I studied math and I love math, I can't think of that many practical occurrences when we had to draw a tangent, draw a tangent, and label a. Okay, so at this point, hopefully my cursor doesn't tell me exactly where I am on the tablet. It's going to let me, there we go, AR. And so at this point, we've got revenue now equals costs, and so we have no profit only in the long run. So there we go. Draw the AC, MC, and MR, but not yet the AR. Determine the Q, and forget about MC and MR. Draw a vertical line from Q to AC, and at that point where the vertical line meets AC, draw a tangent and label it AR, and then we see that revenue equals costs, and we have normal profit only. And there it is drawn more nicely for you. Here is MR equaling MC. Here's the Q. We brought it up to the average cost curve, and then there's the tangent of AR at that point, and so we have normal profit only. Okay, so in the long run, if we have firms earning economic profits or abnormal profits, they're going to attract new entrants, while loss-making firms in unprofitable, loss-making industries will shut down their plants and leave the industry. So the process of entry and exit of firms in the long run ensures that economic profit or loss is zero, and all firms earn normal profit. So allocative efficiency and productive efficiency. So I'm sorry I didn't bring this up earlier. I cannot flick backwards in this slide presentation, but you can in your handout. But we know that allocative efficiency is when P equals MC, and productive efficiency is by the condition of P equals the minimum ATC. So if you go to that long run equilibrium where you have normal profit only, you're going to see that you don't have at that quantity for where MC equals MR in the long run, that P does not equal MC. It's going to be greater than. And you're also going to see that P does not equal the minimum of average total cost. It's going to be greater than. So again, examining that Price is higher than MC, indicating that there's an under-allocation of resources to the production of the good. Society would like to have had more units of the good produced. Also, price is greater than minimum average total cost, and therefore average cost is higher than what is optimal from society's point of view. And so once again, a reminder, the IB new syllabus is really focusing on market failure. And so again, if you're in the long run equilibrium, where there's normal profit only, we don't have that allocative efficiency. We're not producing where society wants us to produce and at the price that society wants us to produce. And that is at the essence of the new syllabus. Excess capacity. So this is interesting. So what happens is, because the capacity output is the output at where ATC is a minimum and we're not producing there, so that's when a firm's plant capacity is fully used. So the profit maximizing rule of MR equals MC makes it produce at a smaller amount in order to maximize profit. So the difference between capacity output and profit maximizing output is called excess capacity. Excess capacity is the amount of output that is lost when firms underuse their plant and produce a level of output that does not minimize average total cost. So if we were to think of things like restaurants with empty tables, gas stations with no one at the pump, retail outlets of all kinds with few customers, or hotels with empty rooms, this would all be examples of excess capacity caused for this reason, caused by this reason. But product differentiation, so not everything is bad. It gives rise to greater product variety for consumers, which consumers often enjoy. And it's often argued that excess capacity, or this productive inefficiency, is the so-called price that consumers must pay for product variety. The greater the product variety, the larger will be the excess capacity, and the greater the productive inefficiency, the closer the firm will be to monopoly. By contrast, the less the product variety, the lower the excess capacity, and the greater the product efficiency, the closer the firm will be to a perfect competition. So this assignment you don't need to do but gives you an idea of some past IB questions.